Digital business executive Seth Schachner joins us now. He's the managing director of the consultancy firm Strat Americas. Great to have you on the show, Seth. Now, this is
Good
a
afternoon,
major.
Sally.
Thank you. This is a major ruling against the social media company. Break down for us exactly what it means. We had a nice little nugget of information there, but if you could just sort of elaborate a little bit further for us.
Well, sure. I mean, I think there's a kind of a local and regional legal aspect to it, and then there's probably a broader kind of bilateral aspect to it. On the local and kind of regional level, as you just laid out, the EU is particularly strong in its privacy practices, its Digital Services Act, and I think has been, in many respects, leading the way on regulating areas like internet privacy and security. And this one happens to be stemming from Ireland, where a lot of these tech titans have been headquarters. It's certainly a positive tax environment. And I do think in many respects, Ireland is in a certain spot because of the strong position the EU has had on it. So you're sort of seeing it come around from there. And it is about data sharing, basically, and the transfer of data from the local territory back to the American territory where Meta, all of us know Facebook, is headquartered. And I think it, for the moment, is centered around Facebook rather than Instagram or some of the other properties there. But,
so what are the biggest concerns here? We know, obviously, that the EU says that Facebook data is shipped across the Atlantic. It's not protected from American spy agencies. But what kind of data and personal information are we talking here, and what could or would it be used for if it's at risk?
Well, look, I mean, Meta and the other tech titans, you mentioned TikTok as well, do ask for a pretty substantial grant of user information, and certainly from Meta's perspective, they have a very advanced digital advertising business, and that personal information is very key to it, basically. So I think there is concern about the transfer of it. That's the gist of what the consideration is. But I will tell you, though, that you mentioned this. I think what we are expecting is a data agreement between the EU and the US, and I think that'll probably override this and alleviate what we're actually talking about. But yes, it is about the transfer of personal information, and that could directly affect their business.
So talk more about this new data sharing pact that the EU and American officials are potentially going to talk about, which could potentially nullify this order. What does it mean, really? If something like this actually does happen, does it mean that people's personal information is then not going to be protected?
No, I think it will probably have some overarching, agreement on the transfer of data, basically freely between territories, or at least territories that agree to the pact, if you will. But this one's, U.S. and the EU, or the U.S. and Ireland, basically, is what we're talking about. So I don't think it's about protecting it as much as it is about establishing free flow of data and having some boundaries around that.
So what do you think all of this says about the borderless way in which data has traditionally been moved and how government policies are upending them?
Well, I think what it says is that governments are catching up to that borderless transfer of information, and whether that happens on a bilateral basis, a regional basis, I do think it's about kind of catching up. I know here in the U.S. we've had obviously a lot of concerns around ByteDance and TikTok. And when I saw the news, I did see some interesting parallels there. But I do think you'll see fundamentally some form of regulatory acts that come in place that perhaps govern this transfer in a more orderly way, basically. I mean, my hope is that you don't see, information completely siloed off. And I think that's probably what the real concern is about. I know the EU is particularly strong on that in terms of their privacy rights. But I think this will probably be an attempt to kind of ameliorate or alleviate that kind of siloing, if you will. That's my view on it.
All right, Seth Schachner, thanks so much for all your insight.